Let me tell you about the first time I saw RWBY. Volume 1 had just ended, and everyone was eagerly waiting for Volume 2. I heard of it, and I watched the 4 trailers to see what the hype was all about. And I fell in love. It lacked polish and was rough around the edges, but in my eyes it was perfect. There was a sense of wild abandon and pure creative passion that outshined everything bad I could say about it. I was a young artist at the time, and watching the trailers and volumes 1 and 2 was like seeing everything I wished I could make embodied in a single story. Watching RWBY and the passion Monty poured into it made me realize that I too could make my dreams a reality. The ecstatic energy of the fandom surrounding it was surreal. We had never gotten anything like this before, not quite in the way RWBY managed to fulfill in all the right ways. We were excited to see and join in on Monty's journey to make his dream project a reality, and we were fully invested in seeing this diamond in the rough grow to its full potential. Until his death changed all of that. Volume 2 had just ended. Many people knew Monty for years before RWBY, some only at the start of the series, but I only knew him for 1 year. It was a devastating blow, not only to the fandom and to his colleagues at Rooster Teeth, but to RWBY itself. And if you ask me, it was a killing blow. A slow death would follow RWBY after Monty's own death. And deep down, I already realized it when I first heard of his death, but I, like many others, didn't want to believe that. We wanted to believe RWBY still had its spark, so we chose to trust Rooster Teeth. But as the years went on, it only became clearer. There was a time this was Monty Oum's RWBY, but now, this is Rooster Teeth's RWBY. For years I tried to tell myself that they were one and the same, but I can no longer believe that. And many fans out there felt the same way, either dropping the show entirely, or just burning out. Watching but never with the same excitement they once had. That excitement was replaced with skepticism and eventually disappointment and frustration. In spite of this, I still managed to enjoy RWBY for the past 4 years. In just short glimpses, I could find that bright spark I once saw in Monty Oum's RWBY. But I did not find that spark in Rooster Teeth's RWBY. I found it in almost everywhere else. Whether it was fan animations, Shiro Miwa's manga, the manga anthologies, Bunta Kinami's manga adaptation, RWBY fan art and stories, fan rewrites, I was enjoying RWBY more through fans of it and others who were inspired by the show than the actual show itself. Now, please don't misunderstand my criticism for Malice. I don't fault Rooster Teeth for doing their best to continue RWBY, but for many of us, the RWBY we've been getting has fallen far short of what we hoped for when we first got invested in it. Writing quality wasn't the problem, neither were the graphics. RWBY had been lacking in those departments even when Monty was alive. The problem is that the soul of RWBY is gone. It can look like RWBY, can sound like RWBY, but it isn't. You're free to believe otherwise, but for me the difference cannot be clearer. The show's early flaws, coupled with Monty's death, created a huge information gap in the show's production. Rooster Teeth tried to pick up all of the pieces, but it left us with the mess we have today. With its constant retcons, gaps in lore, and under-delivering on huge character moments and payoffs, many fans are frustrated and want to just wipe the slate clean. But we all know that Rooster Teeth is never going to do that. Even if they wanted to, it's not practical to reanimate all of volumes 1 to 3 from Poser to Maya. It's not profitable either, since RWBY is huge now, and they know it's best to just carry that momentum forward instead of going back and risk confusing new viewers. And lastly, their pride is on the line. Monty entrusted RWBY to them after all, and copyright-wise, Rooster Teeth does own RWBY. Why would they, as a company, ever imply that anything is wrong with their product? So, Rooster Teeth isn't going to reboot RWBY. At best, they can only try fixing it for each volume. But as Volume 6 has shown me, every attempt they've made at fixing the show has only gone more and more downhill with each passing volume, and only been more divisive to fans. I'm tired. You can tell me that RWBY's in a good spot right now, they're heading in a good direction, but I personally don't believe that at all. I look at all the cool energetic fight scenes that I can watch 100 times without ever getting bored. I look at all of the cool transforming weapons that I know I'll never see in the show again. I look at all the bright iconic characters that I used to love. And I look at this show brimming with story and potential, and I tell you that I cannot be satisfied. I'm done with Rooster Teeth's RWBY. Instead of sitting around moping about what could have been, I'm going to try my best to make it a reality. and I hope that you join me for this journey. It's not going to be perfect, and it's not going to be pretty, but I'm going to try my hardest to do the show a fraction of the justice that it deserves. Who am I, you may ask, to be so pretentious as to say that current RWBY is inferior, and I'm going to make something better? How can I say that when there are people on Rooster Teeth who have personally worked with Monty Oum? Well, I'm just a regular guy who really loves RWBY. And I can't say that my version is better, but if what I've done makes you feel just a fraction of what you felt and what I felt when you first fell in love with this show, then I think I've done my job. So what's my goal? I'm going to try and reboot RWBY. It'll be called the Unofficial RWBY Reboot, because Rooster Teeth is never going to acknowledge it. So, where do we begin from here? I have a few ideas. Let's start. This would be the first time I've tried to rewrite RWBY. As you can see, it started as a project I called RWBY Visions, but the fallout from RWBY Volume 6 very nearly broke me. I couldn't look at RWBY straight anymore. My enjoyment of the series was ruined, but I still needed to make my voice heard. I was still intent on making this project work and show the world, and especially the disillusioned fans, even just a short glimpse that RWBY can meet our high expectations. As you can see, I'm mainly an artist, not a writer. I'm going to pitch you this reboot, not with my words, but with the artwork I've made for this project. There will be major changes for the story from what I've planned so far, but I will explain my reasoning for each one of them, and hopefully you'll agree and understand my decisions. So, what's my goal with this project? How are you supposed to view this new RWBY, and what should you expect from it? Should you call it RWBY rewritten, revamped, revisited? So what I'd use is reinvigorated. After spending what is 6 years now in this series, I think what I and a lot of like-minded fans need is new life to be injected into the series back again. This means that there'll be a lot of changes, but it retains the spirit of the original, and these changes are made, hopefully, in order to benefit the story as a whole. It seems a bit abstract. Imagine if this project were made sometime like 5 to 10 years from now. RWBY has either ended or discontinued, and was something of a classic for trouble production, now picked up by new hands to renew it for new generations and old fans alike. This mindset will be reflected in all aspects, from designs to story and lore. Minor and even major changes will be made to canon, yes, but I hope in doing so I can sort of take liberties and communicate why I think the original is going for certain things, more of the general big picture, the essence of things, rather than actual details, structure of the plot, etc. In this pitch video, I'll be talking about the aesthetics and feel, revised Remnant, revised kingdoms, hunters, Grimm, aura and dust, and hopefully that's it for this video. I won't go into too much detail, but just enough to let you know what makes this reboot unique and what I'm going for. The swords of our fathers, the swords of our children. This is the creed of the Huntsmen academies and of the nation of Vale, one of the last 4 nations in the world of Remnant. Besieged on all sides by the beasts of Grimm, born from a cataclysm long ago that shattered the Remnant's moon, the same event that awakened the power of aura and dust. The 4 nations are separated, heavily fortified, and stand as the last bastions of civilization and hope for all of humankind. In the middle of this are 4 girls, brought together by destiny, young huntresses in training, studying at Beacon Academy. RWBY has a very strong mainstream appeal, and I want to capture that. Say what you want about games like Destiny or Anthem. When I saw the promotional material for these games, there was definitely a certain feel going on that RWBY shares a lot of similarities with. A sci-fi world of fantasy and mystical elements? Check. A world ravaged by an unknown hostile force? Check. An order of ancient and venerated warriors with awesome powers and cool weapons? Check. A generally idealistic and hopeful tone, also check. A troubled production with many controversies with lofty promises and high expectations, but ultimately becoming shallow or under-delivering on these promises first given to its fans. Yeah. Despite that, I do like the general aesthetic and intent of these kind of stories, and if done right, can really strike a chord with people, since people keep wanting to see stories like these, including myself. Despite numerous failures and disappointments in the industry, I think it still was a shot. These settings never fail to get me hyped and excited. It feels like there's so much room for creativity and just plain fun action, as well as inspirational stories of teamwork and the human drive to improve, and even a transcendental element like finding your destiny, or discovering your place in this chaotic but hopeful world. RWBY is very similar to these settings, so I'll be taking the best parts of these franchises to create my own sort of ultimate version within the framework of RWBY. Sci-fi world of fantasy and mystical elements? Enter the world of Remnant. A modern world of guns and airships, but also strange creatures, animal people, and numerous allusions to mythology and fairy tales, giving an air of mysticality and fantasy. Hostile unknown force? Enter the Grimm. Born from the collective regrets, fears, and insecurities of humanity, they are the dark side of humankind given physical form, a complete antithesis to the bright, optimistic world of the story. Ancient order of warriors. Enter the Huntsmen, the defenders of Remnant. Armed with amazing weapons and powers, these are the people you wish you could become. Strong, courageous, and noble, they are the symbols of peace and strength in a ravaged world. The universe of the RWBY reboot consists of the world Remnant and the moon Fortuna, which was never named in canon. Symbolically, the goddess Fortuna has been associated with both good and bad luck and with fate. The Wheel of Fortune is a common metaphor for life's chaotic nature. Much of what makes Remnant what it is today can be traced back to a singular legendary event called the Shattering. In this event, taking place countless of generations ago, the moon Fortuna was shattered. Around the same time, mysterious monsters called the Grimm emerged, and so did the manifestation of aura and dust. It's hard to tell which came first, but most people just equate all of this to the same time frame of the moon's destruction. There is no mention of the two brother gods, or maidens, or the relics in this project. I personally felt those elements only cluttered the lore of RWBY, and the introduction of the relics and gods shifted the story from a character-driven one to a plot-driven one, strung along by MacGuffins, which is not what I think RWBY should be focused on. The hunt for the relics overshadowed many of the characters' own motivations and arcs, and made the story incredibly linear, which I didn't like, so that's why I'm writing them out. The four kingdoms are Vale, Vacuo, Mistral, and Atlas. There are many smaller kingdoms and city-states in between, but these are the four major civilizations on Remnant, bordering on being empires and countries of their own. They are not strictly kingdoms today, but it's a term used by the common layman due to Remnant's history. In legends long past, by the formation of the kingdoms, the whole world was swallowed in darkness, and humanity was cornered by the Grimm and nearly perished. One last colony, gathered on the mountains of Sanus, prepared for their final stand. From this colony, 10 mighty warriors, each from different corners of the world, brought together by adversity, stood as the last line of defense against the Grimm and prevailed. Of the 10, 6 died in battle, but 4 remained, bloodied but victorious. These 4 will be the heroes of humanity, who later would voyage to the ends of the world, settling and ruling new territories as the 4 kings of old, hence the name the 4 kingdoms. The grouping of huntsmen into teams of 4 is a tradition to honor their legacy in hopes of achieving that same greatness. However, with that great legacy also comes great status and power, and while the influence of the kingdom spread, there are those who wish to rule themselves, casting themselves away from the safety of the kingdoms, particularly Vale. Seeing this as a rejection of the sacrifices of their forefathers, Vale denounced them and left them to fend for themselves, calling them the Exiles. The land was brutal and dangerous, but the Exiles valued their freedom and endurance overall. To adapt to the hostile world, they began developing strange semblances that permanently changed their bodies and gave them animal features to better survive in the world. These traits were genetically inherited by their children, and so the foreigners were born. Not every exile is born a foreigners, but every foreigner owes their existence to their exiles. As such, they are considered lowborn by the kingdoms. The animalistic features considered a curse for spitting on the sacrifices of their ancient heroes to live as savages. These exiles would soon spread all across Remnant. Some would migrate into the kingdoms and assimilate into the local population, with varying levels of success and acceptance by people inside the kingdoms. Vale, after the Great War, acknowledged their exiles and welcomed them into their fold once again as a sign of goodwill, but not everyone was happy about it. Some old family dynasties within Vale, like the Winchester family, still remember the exiles' affront and vehemently oppose welcoming foreigners born from that bad blood into their academies and kingdoms. Many exiles still do not wish to bend the knee to the kingdoms, and as such remain outside of their walls, taking pride in their independence. The White Fang, a foreigner-centered organization fighting for the equal standing of foreigners to humans, and for the exiles to be recognized not as pariahs, but as equals, who fought just as hard and deserve every right to stand proudly as their own kingdom. The White Fang are not interested in the kingdom's pity, and view any exile or foreigners who migrate to live within the kingdoms as weak and contradictory to their cause. Their numbers are made up of exiles all over Sanders and the rest of Remnant. Let us pull up Remnant's map right here. The four kingdoms are Vale, Vacuo, Mistral, and Atlas. But why is Atlas there? I'll get to that very soon, so hold on tight. First is Vale, whose inspiration is Western Europe and some of the Americas, with culture I've mainly based on stuff like fairy tales and, rather importantly, Arthurian legend. Beacon Academy is located far from the city and is only accessible by sea or air. The academy was built after the Great War, but further outward, nestled among the mountains that border Vale, stands a great monument called the Crown of Swords. It's a mighty wall built at the site of the Great Battle to honor the 10 warriors who saved humankind. Along the wall are 10 massive blades, now 9, that stand as a symbol of Vale's strength and valor. Everyone in Vale knows what the Crown of Swords look like, but few have ever seen it in person other than hunters and students of Beacon. Vacuo is based on regions such as the Middle East, Africa, and India. I will have characters based on the 1001 Nights, Sinbad, Aladdin, etc., along with the canon characters like Sun. Haven't written much about them yet, so I'll leave it at that for now. Mistral is primarily East Asian influence by a huge majority. While Mistral is the central kingdom, much of the settlements in Anima are decentralized and scattered. And now we come to the fun part, Atlas. Now why did I move Atlas to the Western Dragon continent instead of up there in Mental? One, for geographic reasons. Mental's location has always bothered me. Atlas is supposed to have a strong army and be technologically advanced above all the other kingdoms, but an icy wasteland like Mental, which is pretty much the North Pole of Remnant, should not have the food nor the habitable land necessary to sustain a large population worthy of such a military empire. I also thought that Mental was so isolated from the other kingdoms that it became problematic. I moved it to the Western Dragon continent to keep them relatively close to Vale, and let's just say I plan to have plenty of political tension between Atlas and Vale, so this arrangement benefits me. Second is for cultural reasons. We know that the Wyvern continent is usually shown as being mostly either volcanoes or wasteland, but I'm cutting that down to make it more habitable. Large portions of it are still highly volcanic, but much of it is habitable and home to many diverse cultures. It's also cold up north, so it can still accommodate the classic frozen Atlas from canon, but allowing a lot more room for diverse cultures and locales elsewhere. Also, did you notice how I said Mistral was mostly East Asian? But we know that Pyrrha and Nora are from Mistral, right? Well, I'm changing that. The Greek and Nordic cultures where Pyrrha and Nora are based on are now moved over to Atlas, which also necessitated moving these two characters as well. As such, Atlas has a very clear European influence, with many cultures like Germanic, Greek, and Nordic influenced people calling it home. Why did I do this? Well, the main reason is that it's less of a headache for me to figure out when world building, since the cultural distribution makes more sense now. And second is because of the map's aesthetics. Notice how there are two dragon-shaped continents on Remnant, one that's shaped like an Eastern dragon, and one shaped like a Western dragon or wyvern. I kept the people on this continent primarily East Asian, and moved the more Western people groups over to the wyvern-shaped continent. I personally like this juxtaposition a lot. It just makes a lot of sense to me that the map and world building are congruent like this. Maybe a little bit on the nose, but hey, I like it. So to clarify, I'm calling this now inhabited wyvern continent Solitas, while the icy north remains as just Mental, separating the two names. Mental is now just the North Pole of Remnant. You obviously would have some questions about Pyrrha and Nora since I moved them so far, and also about the possible location of Salem's domain. That will come into the section about revised characters and arcs, so don't worry about that. Hunters, also officially known as the New Hunters, are an order of warriors who defend the kingdoms. They evolved from their predecessor, the Hunters' Order, a guild-like organization that holds no allegiance to the world's governments. Following the Great War, the kingdoms agreed to centralize the training of hunters to special academies localized in each kingdom's capital. Some of the warriors from the Hunters' Order disagree with this decision, believing that binding the hunters to the kingdoms would weaken the order and make it complacent, and so left to form a renegade organization that rivals the academies, called the Wild Hunt. More on them later. Travel between the kingdoms is mostly done by huntsmen. Very few civilians are actually able to travel between the kingdoms, and is a privilege only afforded by the rich and influential, such as the Schnees, as well as politicians, military personnel, and traders, as well as transfer students to different hunter academies. Upon graduation, hunters are grouped into one of two divisions, Venators and Sentinels. New students and teams will often choose one of the two divisions to specialize in, often taking electives unique to their division of choice. Team RWBY are part of the Venator division, specialized in exploring outside of Vale and actively investigating and eliminating external and unknown threats. As such, they must be skilled in aspects of survival, stealth, mobility, and combat. They never stay in one place for too long, and will often operate on field missions for long stretches of time, only returning to the kingdoms on occasion. Team Juniper, on the other hand, are part of the Sentinel division, specialized in defending the kingdom's borders, but also operating outside of the kingdoms on static objectives such as border patrol, establishing garrisons, and protecting trade routes and envoys/diplomats coming from other kingdoms. They must be skilled in aspects of defense, diplomacy, and rescue/relief efforts. While Team RWBY are off field missions, Juniper usually stays to defend Vale and are more informed about the internal politics of the kingdom. Both divisions are known to work together on joint missions, or if a threat demands large amounts of manpower, such as a large-scale attack. Upon enrollment, students are grouped into teams of 4 for purposes of encouraging teamwork and for their individual safety, as well as being a nod to the 4 kings. Some break up upon graduation, though many stay together due to their closer bond and synergy cultivated over their years together as a team. Skilled and charismatic hunters often become celebrities in their own right, having their own merchandise and memorabilia. One such person is a famous huntress called Summer Rose, who was well known for being an argent, a person born with silver eyes. Grimm are born from the regrets, fears, and flaws of humankind. Though they are widely believed to have originated during the shattering of the moon Fortuna, this is so long ago that humanity no longer remembers the time before the Grimm and have treated them as an inseparable part of their lives. The Grimm are created from the negativity caused from human emotions and actions and are commonly referred to as humanity's shadow, always perpetuating as long as humans despair and suffer. Some view the Grimm as a necessary evil born from humanity's sins and griefs and are as fundamental to life as death itself. Most people, however, view the Grimm as unnatural abominations born from Fortuna's collapse. Some view them as a curse or punishment from the gods. Some as the retribution for humanity's collective wrongs given physical form as a supernatural avenger. It is common belief, even among hunters, that tiers of Grimm correspond to certain levels of negativity and have been classified as such according to threat level. Tier 1. Small Grimm that can be killed by trained soldiers and hunters and even capable civilians. Believed to be born by minor wrongs or acts like misunderstandings, offenses, and bursts of anger. Tier 2. A very common Grimm type that require a hunter or skilled student to kill. Are understood to be associated with individuals that have deep-seated character flaws and serious acts of wrongdoing, like loneliness, anger, etc. Deaths of loved ones and murders are also said to give birth to these types of Grimm. Tier 3 and above are large Grimm, requiring one or more teams to kill. Often believed to be either an amalgamation of multiple Tier 1 or 2 Grimm of the same type coalescing together, or born from very grave actions. It is common belief that whenever many people die at once, such as through disease, disaster, or war, a huge Grimm spontaneously takes form from the collective despair and trauma. Tier 4 Grimm are very rare. They are so rare and unique that they are given special names to identify them, and teams of hunters assigned to try to document and track their movements and activity whenever they surface. It is never proven, but researchers support observations that the appearance of these massive unique Grimm usually surface strangely around the time of a major disaster event. Many famous hunters have either fallen to Tier 4 Grimm or have long-standing vendettas with them, causing these hunters to be associated with one of these Grimm as their lifelong nemesis. Tier 5 Grimm are where most researchers dive into theory. They theorize that the events of the Great War would have likely catalyzed the creation of a unique Tier 5 Grimm, capable of destroying the Crown of Swords and rampage through Vale with its mere advance, and would take entire armies to destroy it. While decried as fearmongers and pseudoscientists, those who believe it are convinced such a Grimm created for the collective atrocities of the Great War is simply inevitable. It It simply is either not fully taken form yet or lies dormant, waiting for the proper time to awaken. Tier 6 Grimm are the stuff of legend, and is the highest possible tier, reserved to what is called Primal Grimm, a hypothetical original Grimm born from Fortuna's shattering. Legends say that there are two Primal Grimm, the Brothers Grimm as they call it. One of them fell to Remnant and lies dormant at the bottom of the sea, and the other still lurks around Fortuna, watching for the blackness of space. Hunters are equipped with special weapons that allow them to fight Grimm. Standard metal bullets and projectiles are effective to most regular Grimm, but powerful Grimm like tier 3 and above are resistant to any kind of physical attack and can only be hurt by either aura-empowered attacks and weapons or high-caliber dust-infused rounds. But where there is death, there must also be life. As the Wheel of Fortuna turns to bring great misfortune, it also brings a hidden blessing. This blessing was the manifestation of aura, the creation of dust, mankind's key to defend against the Grimm. Aura and dust are two parts of an unbreakable cycle. When a human soul dies, their body returns to ashes, and their aura breaks down and crystallizes into a solid form. The sacrifices of the previous generation becomes the means to secure and protect the next. Though mined as an industry, all people in Remnant know the origin of dust, and man who is born from it, and they would do well to honor its sacred role in securing the continuation of humanity. Semblances are not unique to each individual, rather they are very closely tied to an individual's fate. It's common practice in Remnant to stereotype people based on their semblance. They say, you can tell a lot about someone from their semblance. It is born from their personality and desires and manifests itself outwardly from an inward drive to make that desire a reality. Maybe that person wants to run away, maybe they want to face life head on, or they never want to let down someone who may need them. This is what defines a semblance. Semblances are a mysterious occurrence. They cannot be understood from a purely scientific standpoint. They are legends and myths of people whose semblances not only mirror their inner desires, but affect fate itself, even intertwining itself with the destinies of others, manifesting in ways that are not easily defined as bound to a single life alone. I've said earlier that Summer Rose was a famous huntress, and no other person in Remnant is a bigger fan of Summer than her own daughter, Ruby Rose. Ruby owns every single collectible of her mother imaginable in the form of action figures, trading cards and more, both out of admiration and a desire to understand and relate to the mother she barely knew as a child, before she was taken away from her. Think of it like Akko's admiration of Shiny Chariot in Delaware Academia, if Shiny Chariot were Akko's deceased mother. To Ruby, her mother is everything. Her dream of being a huntress stems from her desire to be just like her, a role model who was the perfect huntress who fought to protect others and preserve all that's good in the world. Ruby was also born in Argent like her mother. People born with a rare trait in the form of silver eyes, said to be able to quell a Grimm's urge to kill and scare away entire waves of monsters with a single look. Many eyewitness accounts spoke of Summer doing just that, saving entire towns and villages by staring down the encroaching darkness before the beast stopped and slowly returned the way they came, never to return, herself never lifting her weapon. People were stunned that such power they only heard of in storybooks was actually observed within their lifetimes. This earned Summer an almost mythical reputation and status as a huntress unlike any other, and she became something of an icon for an entire generation, despite her age and relatively recent start to her career as a huntress. This no doubt led to incredibly high expectations for Ruby when she enrolled the Signal and eventually Beacon. Though Ruby wanted nothing more than to be a huntress like her mother, she was a shy and awkward girl, insecure about her silver eyes. She had countless friends in Signal that she can barely recall that all wanted to be friends with the silver-eyed girl. She was bullied plenty too for this reason as well. We call her Freak who can probably talk to Grimm. Being admitted to Beacon 2 years ahead only heightened her insecurities. She feels the intense need to prove herself through her combat ability, desperately hoping she'll be acknowledged for her own skill and not for her eyes, whose powers she never fully awakened or even fully understands. This is also due to her overprotective father, Tai Yang, never wanting to talk about her eyes, and only ever spoke of Summer as a loving mother and never as a huntress. Though Ruby truly loves her father, she never felt she could fully open up to him, knowing that her eyes and the powers it entailed were a constant reminder of the wonderful woman they both lost. Uncertain of herself and her potential, but always believing the best in others, earnest and hopeful, with a bright smile and simple, honest heart, this is our hero, Ruby Rose. vibrant continent of Solitas is home to many diverse cultures, but one force that tries to assert control over them all is the Kingdom of Atlas, or more accurately, the Elysian Empire. At the heart of this military machine is the patronage of the Schnees, an ancient dynasty of hunters who once policed and secured the trade and safekeeping of dust, but now have monopolized the trade and become the top manufacturer in dust trade in the form of the Schnee Dust Company. But behind this corporate exterior, the Schnees never forgot their roots. The pride of the Schnee bloodline lies in just that, their blood. Every promising Schnee is raised from childhood to be a perfect warrior, undergoing intense rituals and training regimens perfected through countless generations. At the center of this are the glyphs, the Schnee's signature semblance, inherited by all successive heirs to the name. Though touted as a hereditary semblance, it is actually a carefully cultivated ability forced onto the child from an early age. Through intense mental stress, shedding of one's individuality and identity, suppression of the individual will, and even the inherent semblance, with the wonders of modern science, partial aura transfers, and experimental implantation of ancestral memories, the perfect warrior is created, able to wield the unmatched power and versatility of the glyphs. And the latest and brightest, most talented subject in this long tradition is also their most driven and rebellious heiress. Raised to be the perfect fighter, armed with the power of the glyphs to be prepared in every situation and to excel in every aspect of being a hunter, this girl was taken, deprived of family and human contact, in order to train day and night without fail. This same girl was placed in front of a huge mirror deep beneath the Schnee mansion, an ancient family heirloom hundreds of years old that has reflected the faces of countless great Schnees. She would stand there at the beginning of each day's training and at the end of it, and utter the same words every day without fail. I am a Schnee and no one else. I am a Schnee and nothing else. In spite of this, a great and terrible fire stokes within this young Schnee girl, plagued by feverish dreams at night and hallucinations by day. Flashes of her ancestors' memories caused by all the partial aura transfers using dust harvested from the Schnee catacombs containing trace amounts of their faded aura. All this became too much for her and she rebelled, wanting to escape that mansion and the Atlas by any means possible. Beacon became not only her escape, but her proving grounds to show that she is more than just a family name. Where the Schnees were a line of great and illustrious hunters, she would be more than all of them. With their memories plaguing her dreams, she knew them more than anyone else possibly could. And she would be more than even them. She would be perfect. Thus she began her path, with the first step that was truly hers. Thus began the journey of Weiss Schnee. The Exiles. Cast out from Vale hundreds of years ago, and spreading to the rest of Remnant, they began to adapt to the hostile world they now called home, and it became a part of them. These people among the exiles would pass this reminder of their plight onto their children, forever changing them into the faunus. The exiles living outside the walls of Vale wear their independence and freedom as a badge, though many do in fact crave the approval of the kingdoms and long to be their equals. Blake Belladonna was one such person of such conflicting desires, born an exile and a faunus no less, forced to fight in order to survive, and joining the increasingly militant White Fang in order to make her voice heard. On one side, she is hurt and angry that her people were cast aside and treated as lesser beings for simply desiring their own freedom and being different. On the other hand, she also desires the acknowledgement of not only her brethren, but the people who hate her, to be accepted as one of their own. Blake has dreamt of nothing more than to see the exiles and the kingdoms reconciled, and for them to stand together as one. However, the White Fang who shared these same values began to change, and instead of seeking equality with the kingdoms, now seek to destroy and undermine them in any way possible. She was swept up in their hate for a time, becoming one of their strongest agents, but soon hated the person she became and left, never looking back. She would escape the Beacon's walls where she would seek her new life. She was arrested on sight, but Headmaster Osman personally requested for her, but he would make a deal with Blake to atone for her past by becoming a huntress under him, promising him that she would be ready to oppose her comrades in the Fang when the time came. She agreed, much to Glinda's abject rejection and skepticism of Blake's intentions. She joins Beacon, calling herself a transfer student, a migrant foreigner enrolling as part of a public relations program between Vale and the Exiles to house refugee families and provide their children with education, simply naming herself as Blake and nothing more. For Weiss, she was going to be more than a name, but for Blake, she was to be only a name. No, less than a name. a shadow passing over the wall, hoping with all her heart that if once, just a single chance would come, she could do something good and cleanse all that she had done from her guilt-ridden heart, and be finally free of her past. While Ruby viewed Summer more as a hero from all the stories she heard of her, Yang, who was slightly older, knew her more as a loving mother. But in the back of her mind, Yang always felt she was different. Ruby's future was clear to Yang. She was born to be just like her mother, but Yang's own future was both unclear and her greatest fear because of her birth mother. What little she knew of her, she learned from Crow, plus whatever pieces her secretive father would accidentally slip out. She was a hunter who turned rogue and never looked back, forsaking her family and only looked out for herself. Yang feared becoming her, but unwittingly showed signs of that same behavior herself. Yang and Ruby were extremely close as children. She would do anything for her little sister. After Summer's death, Yang took it upon herself to care for both herself and Ruby, becoming the mother they both needed. But as time went on, Yang became distant. She grew into a naturally distrusting person, always smiling but inwardly doubting the intentions of others. Taiyang refused to tell Yang and Ruby about either of their mothers, which led her to only trust herself to find the truth. She became fiercely independent and resourceful, but also a bit of a delinquent. Yang doesn't care much for formalities or manners at all. She's wild and emotional. She hates losing, and she hates the helplessness of not knowing. Though she didn't have a bad relationship with Ruby, towards their teenage years she didn't know how to deal with her. Though they were very close as children, Ruby's earnestness and honesty made Yang feel uneasy, wary that Ruby, the person she cared most for, might see her for the incomplete person that she was. My proposed version of Yang is not quite the team mom of Ruby, at least not yet. She grows into the role the more she bonds with her team. But initially, Yang is quite the opposite. She's always cheerful, but her interactions with others are always shallow. She appears incredibly involved at the moment, yet emotionally distant once the party dies down. Her desire for Ruby to be independent stems from her own realization that she herself is inadequate to be Ruby's mother figure. There was no way she could trust herself to take care of Ruby while she carried the loss of both her mothers, a fact she grew more aware of the older and more rebellious she became. And yet knowing Ruby, Yang could never fully lose sight of her little sister. She even envied Ruby a little for seeing the loss of Summer as a way to carry forward and as a source of inner strength and admiration. Like Taiyang, Yang only ever viewed the loss of Summer and her birth mother as two pieces of her forcefully torn away. The Yang presented here is more conflicted, with a lot going on under the surface. She hides a lot of grief and mixed emotions that she never had the opportunity to vent, choosing instead to shut them away and be strong for Ruby's sake, only to then grow distant once they enter adulthood, and she sees herself as a poor replacement for what they both lost. But who was Yang's mother? Yang didn't know much other than her name, but that alone was enough to give a pretty strong impression, because many people in Vale and Remnant know that name, and curse it. If it weren't for Crow's accomplishments as a hunter, he'd be publicly cast out for sharing that same last name, because that name belongs to one of the most feared rogue hunters and criminals in Remnant, the Queen of Dawn, Raven Brownwood. Yang knows little more than what the public knows, that Raven is the leader of a tribe of bandits, or to be more accurate, a queen, atop a soaring fortress, ruler of a kingdom of rebels and traitors, and captain of a fleet of sky pirates. When airships travel Remnant skies, they fear two things, the Grimm and Raven's fleet. Knowing her mother is the most wanted woman in Remnant, a thief, a tyrant, and a murderer, Yang is ever fearful of progress, afraid of what she'll become, afraid to commit, to improve, to change. There's only the thrill of the moment for Yang, and that's all she ever wants. But deep down, her desire to find her mother is irrational and overpowering. Why did you leave me? Yang wants to ask. She may be gone, a fugitive of the kingdoms, but the weight of Raven's shadow hangs over Yang with the constant threat of one simple question. If Ruby was born to be a virtuous hero like her mother, loved and respected by all, then what were you born to become? I can't say much about Juniper yet, unfortunately, because I haven't found solid ideas for them yet, but I can give you what bits and pieces I have for some of them. John has a lot going on, so I won't reveal anything solid for him yet. Sorry, John, but I do know that the Arcs were a very powerful family, perhaps descended from one of the 10 warriors of Remnant, who were crippled in the Great War and never recovered. John was deliberately raised to be ignorant of aura and other things because his parents are apparently allergic to the very possibility of John becoming a hunter. Pyrrha Nikos is the daughter of a famous warrior queen of Atlas known as Tomire the Brave, and she is a warrior princess from the port city of Tamaris, the capital city of the Bronze Isles in the seas between Vale and Solitas, famous for being protected by the Athenoi, a race of fierce warriors hardened from battling Grimm for generations. Due to a recent booming trade and relations with Vale, the proud and closed-off Athenoi began to soften, their opening to the world culminating in Queen Tomire allowing her daughter Pyrrha to study at Vale, who was curious and wished to learn and relate to Vale's tenets of chivalry and guardianship. Pyrrha is polite and an incredibly skilled warrior, but somewhat ignorant of Vale's social norms due to being raised on an island with a ruling warrior caste her entire life. She sometimes takes metaphors literally and misquotes or misuses idioms, basically making her more socially inept in her own unique way to match John and to give her some cute quirks. Now I mentioned Nora and Ren earlier, possibly sharing some kind of bond that ties their fate together, but I actually don't know much at the moment. All I know for now is, tentatively Nora is from a clan of Viking-like people far up north in Solitas, but her clan was destroyed by a legendary Grimm called the World Serpent. She fell into the water before some sailors found her hanging onto some driftwood, and she was raised on the sea until she met Ren. Similarly, Ren would be from Mistral and perhaps his village was destroyed too. I'm thinking he was raised to be an aura monk kind of fighter, who was unable to complete his training as his master died and he was forced to flee. Sounds like a classic kung fu movie premise, that's all I got for now. He then ended up fighting Nora, and they stuck together ever since, eventually agreeing to go to Vale where they can find a stable place to stay and take refuge, but still have their unfinished business back home and will end up having to go back and retake what was taken away from them. Anyway, with that said, that concludes my pitch for my unofficial RWBY reboot. There were a lot of different ideas here, but if there's one takeaway you should get from all this, is that I'm putting a big emphasis on the characters and making them sync well with the world. I've made some pretty big changes to the map and character backstories, but please know I decided to do so because I feel these choices would serve to enrich the world of Remnant and enhance what's already there and try to bring out its best points. I have nothing but the utmost respect for what Monty and to an extent Rooster Teeth built, but I have no reservations changing things if I think they can convey things better and more consistently. Anyway, now that this is out, I'll be making smaller videos going into more detail about the reboot, and possibly any addendums from community feedback. Some future videos about the Reboot universe, which still has no proper title yet, will include some cool stuff like more detail on Juniper once I flesh out their arcs, the rival academy faction known as the Wild Hunt, Raven Branwen, the Sky Pirate Queen, and more. I hope you've enjoyed this little presentation and thanks for watching. More importantly, thank you for joining me on this journey. Whether you're a disillusioned fan, or you love canon RWBY and think there's nothing wrong with it, that's totally fine. But with this, I want to show you what I sincerely hope is not necessarily a better RWBY, but a rejuvenated one. A RWBY closer to what Monty teased us with in the trailers and the early volumes, and a RWBY closer to what our imaginations were sparked by all those years ago, at least in spirit if not in form, overflowing with creativity and passion. Am I too damn arrogant to think that I know what a dead man's wishes were for his story? I'd agree with you if you think that way, actually. Being an artist myself, I do believe I know at least a little bit of how Monty's creative intent worked. I never knew him personally, but I knew him through his work, as we all did. And to me, the work I saw in the 4 trailers and the early volumes is a completely different work from what I'm seeing now, and that is why I toiled to make this a reality. Not because I hate RWBY and want to divide the fandom, but because I love it and I want to see the best RWBY can be. I know I'm not a great writer, and some other people's ideas are better than mine. But if I'm somehow a toxic fan, or nothing but a complainer for wanting to believe RWBY can be better than what it is now, then I respectfully say you're wrong. This series is so close to me. For all this janky animation, for all its jokes, for all this amateur voice acting, I could not ask for a more perfect series, and all I want is to feel excited for RWBY again. To feel like a creator spoke to me through his work, and I felt a genuine connection even though we've never met. Though it may seem that way, this isn't Monty vs Rooster Teeth. That's oversimplifying. I acknowledge RWBY was as much a Rooster Teeth show as it was Monty's. Their humor, references, and style were all over the early volumes. But now, it's all Rooster Teeth. Whether the same Rooster Teeth as the one that started RWBY, I can't say. But Monty's passion is what's missing from the show right now. It's what made me love this show, and it's what I desperately want to see in RWBY again. Monty lit the fire that was RWBY. The fans still carry that fire, and I sincerely hope Rooster Teeth does too. But for now, the best I can do with what I have and what I know is to just trust myself. And in gratitude for the show that changed my life, and to honor the man who inspired me and thousands of others, is to carry my own fire and share it with the world. The RWBY that Monty would have finished is gone. We'll never know what it could have been. But the spark that RWBY planted in all of us lives on. It lives on in the Team Silver and Charcoal trailers. It lives on in RWBY 3.0. It lives on in Shiromiya's manga, in Brun Takenami's manga, the anthologies. It lives on in Dylan Gu's animations. It lives on in Cross Tag Battle. It lives on in the hearts of thousands who love this flawed but oh so perfect idea about 4 girls named after colors and a map made out of napkin and ketchup. And now I hope it lives on in my silly little reboot. These sparks that live on, they're by no means perfect. Even Monty's wasn't. They're cut short, inadequate, misshapen. Yet every misshapen spark's unseen beauty is greater than its would-be judgment. What more then, if that beauty could be seen in all of its forms? This is only the beginning.